Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing this morning? Yeah, thank you. Um, I'm Stanford Cross, and I'm a board member of the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire. Welcome to day 2 of the 17th Annual Black New England Conference. If you were here yesterday, we hope we inspired you by some of the creative thinkers of our time, including Clef Notes, Akia, DeBarros Gomez, and pop icon Robin S.
Thank you, Stan. I'm Cabria Baumgartner. Sorry about that. I'm the Dean's Associate Professor of History and Africana Studies here at Northeastern, and I agree with Stan. Yesterday was exhilarating. We engaged in meaningful dialogue that I hope created a deeper understanding of creative expression in our BIPOC communities. I've been working with the Black Heritage Trail now for 6 years. First when I was on the faculty at the University of New Hampshire, and now at Northeastern University. And I'm so delighted that this partnership between Northeastern and the Black Heritage Trail has come to fruition, and we see it here at the conference. So I would like to, I think my notes got a little...
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right here.
So the trail has been engaging hearts and minds and sharing the richness of Black history as they work towards building more inclusive communities.
I'd like to thank Northeastern University and the Reckonings Project for being a major conference partner, and I'd like to take a moment to thank the rest of the conference sponsors. Without those support, this conference would not be possible. So again, thank you. I'm going to give a double shout out. I know you're going to shout out to the volunteers and make this possible as well. So without you, it wouldn't be possible. So thank you as well. You can see our sponsors up on the screen and in your program booklet. So if you see them, thank them because they are a supporter of the trail and this project. So thank you.
And I would also like to take the time to acknowledge and thank the Northeastern crew of volunteers for their support and good cheer throughout the planning of this conference, not just today, but for many months. And I'd like to mention a few by name. First, Laurel Schlegel. She led an awesome jazz tour on Thursday, showing us important jazz sites throughout the South End. Jen Grieve, many thanks to her. Diana Atui, who's sitting in the back. And also Grace Dolan, who's in the back too. Thank you. And I extend my deep thanks to Uta Poiger. She's currently special advisor to the provost, but she's formerly the dean of the College of Social Sciences and Humanities here at Northeastern, a position and role that she held for over a decade. And she has been at the forefront of community engagement and co-creation initiatives with BIPOC communities for years. And so I'm glad that we have her as a co-leader of the Reckonings project. So thank you so much, Uta. And one more set of thanks to the tech team, Adam at PAC Network in the back. Thank you for making this all seamless. To Marie and facilities also for your dedication and help. And to the catering staff for keeping us well fed. Thank you. And as a reminder to our virtual attendees about navigating this conference, welcome to those of you who are joining us virtually. We have posted a link in the chat so you can go to a conference program to follow along with all the panels and video presentations that will occur today. We will have Q&A sessions at the end of each panel, And if you have questions during the presentations, please use the chat feature and start your message with the word question. Conference staff will collect questions and submit them during the audience Q&A session. If you have any technical questions, please put those in the chat as well, prefaced by the letters IT, and conference staff will work with you on that. All right, so without further ado, to get us started for today, let me introduce Jovanna Jones, the host of our first presentation, A Conversation with Playwright Kirsten Greenidge. Jovanna Jones is an assistant professor of African American literature and culture at Boston College, where she teaches 20th and 21st century African American culture and literature. Welcome, Jovanna.
Good morning, everyone. Can we give it up for this rain today? Normally, I'm upset by it, but it's cleansing, it's refreshing, so I hope we all get what we need from this rainy day. Yes, thank you, Cabria, for inviting me to be part of this conversation. Let's get right into it. Kirsten Greenidge is an American playwright whose work is known for employing realistic language to focus on social issues such as the intersectionality of race, gender, and class. When I read articles about Kirsten's work and watch clips from her productions, I notice something else going on too. I think of when I first learned that the magic of a Toni Morrison novel was not only in the artist's talent and craft, but in her historical material. When I was in high school reading Sula, I used to think that Morrison just made this up. And I thought, dang, well, I guess I'll never be able to be a fiction writer because I can't do world making like that. But then over time, I learned about the archival moments that became the seeds for Morrison's novels. The story of Margaret Garner, who was the inspiration for Beloved, or the James Van Der Zee funerary photograph of a girl who was shot by a lover at a party and gave him time to get away. That photo birthed the idea for Morrison's abstract novel, Jazz. Morrison unfolded whole worlds from these moments in Black lives, things that could simply be lost in the archive or never recorded at all. Kirsten Greenidge, I realize, does something similar. She finds these glimmers of interest, conflict, and intimacy in the historical record and current events. The situations that capture her attention stretch from family lore to the nation's history, and even to a teenage pregnancy pact. Like our beloved Black realist playwrights Lorraine Hansberry and August Wilson, Kirsten honors the moments when mundane, everyday affairs become monumental, forcing characters to completely rethink the values that govern their lives. Today, Kirsten will tell us how she arrived at playwriting as her craft. She'll share excerpts from two plays today, the award-winning Milk Like Sugar from 2011, and the praised Our Daughters Like Pillars from 2022. I have a slew of questions for us to get into during the Q&A. We had a very long conversation yesterday, so we're gonna keep it going. And we'll also have plenty of time to hear from you all, the audience today too. So welcome, Kirsten.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see your faces on this rather dreary October morning. Let me see. So in the theater, we're ready for anything. And this was one of those mornings where I didn't have printer, ink my printer. It took a little longer to get here. So we're just gonna be calm and improvise. Thank you, Jovanna, for that introduction. Whenever I hear them, I think, who are they talking about? And I'm also really honored to have been linked to do this speech in honor or in recognition of a Angelina Grimke playwright. I have a, excuse me, a assignment in my playwriting course called Canon Reverb. And all it is students are sent out and they have to bring up a playwright or an artist that was working before 1950, and the Grimke comes up over and over again. So just be linked is wonderful. That's enough of my improvising. I'm gonna actually start talking to y'all now. I'll begin by explaining that at my core, I'm an artist. So I always dreamed of also being a scholar and a historian. That was what I went to school to be. But if I am truthful, and that is usually one of the materials artists are working with the most, and no matter what their medium or discipline, they're asking, like, what is the truth of a thing, and how do I render it? So if I am being truthful, and I want to be truthful, I am not a scholar or a historian. I'm an artist. And so I did not come with a speech, really, or a typical presentation. I don't have any slides. I just have myself and my work. In preparing to come spend time in community with you today, I thought about our conference container, which is Langston Hughes' I Too Sing, and the ways in which it implores a consideration of inclusion. So inclusion is the foundation of my mission as a playwright. I saw my first adult play, which was August Wilson's Joe Turner's Come and Gone, on a field trip as a 7th grader, right down the street there at the Huntington Theater. And I was 12 years old for that field trip. So Joe Turner is the second installment of Wilson's 10-decade cycle of plays about the Black American experience, specifically situated in the mid-Atlantic portion of this country, but haunted and animated by the trauma of the Middle Passage and the experience of being enslaved in the United States and living under the specter of Jim Crow. So I am certain that those who are indeed scholars and historians, and in this case, dramaturgs are my best friend in a process, could discuss precisely what Joe Turner is about. But I will tell you that what it is about to me, it is about loss and grief and violence and estrangement and love and parenthood. I had grown up doing lots of theater, so my mother took me to many live performances, but they were all designed for children. And in the Boston area, we particularly went to Wheelock Family Theater at Boston Children's Theater, and every year, Black Nativity. And those were all experiences I cherished, but I knew as a child they were not adult. And Joe Turner, to me, at 12, and I think still today, is adult. And it was this first show I saw that specifically made me want to be a playwright. I left that matinee knowing I wanted to be a playwright. I wanted to do what August Wilson did with words. It was the first time I saw characters on stage who looked like me, like my uncles, my aunts, my mom, my dad. And at 12, I also felt that seeing performers on stage in this way affirmed something in me. The playwright Susan Laurie Parks writes that just placing Black and brown bodies on stage is a revolutionary act. And seeing this piece sparked a revolution in me. So I knew that after that matinee, I wanted to be a writer for that stage, but I also knew, even if I could not articulate it yet, that whatever work I created would need to be ever rooted in the idea that the proverbial table has room for us all, and that my job would be, as a writer, to make sure that I wrote words to invite those who are not usually on stage onto the stage. I didn't have this language then, but my job, I knew, was to be expansive in my work and in my reach and in my practice as both an artist and an educator. So around the same time, I knew two things, that I wanted to be a writer and that I wanted to be a teacher. I think that has a lot to do with being an oldest child and being really bossy, but I'll take the more altruistic lens. So the seeds for this thought for me came from my education. When my public school faced shutdowns due to budget cuts, my parents, or if I am really honest, my mother, sent my middle sister and myself to Quaker school. And I learned to love writing there. I learned to engage with social justice there. But more importantly, maybe most importantly, I learned the concept of the proverbial table. The idea that there is, because we make it so, always enough room at that table. So growing up and being Black and female and Black and middle class, so comfortable but anxious in terms of money, We didn't have home equity or land property assets, and even though I was the daughter of a Harvard-educated lawyer and a special needs teacher. This idea of the proverbial table, that there is enough room, really resonated for me. It made me believe, truly believe, that there is always space, there is always opportunity, that people, humans, facilitate access, and that scarcity is a myth born of capitalism and hegemony. The Quaker school was also super progressive, as you can imagine by what I'm saying right now. So one lesson we had was a school-wide simulation of world hunger needs. The school created 3 groups, and back then they termed them First World, Second World, and Third World. And the school offered lunch to all of us, and we were designating these groups. And to most, it offered just gruel, which was a thin gray soup. I remember it had onions, and it had lots of spices. To a few, it offered the same gruel, but with some beans and rice. And then just to a handful of the students in the school ordered out pizza and served that. They also ordered, I think, a little extra pizza, so there was a little extra to go around. So no lesson hit home about the idea that there is enough and that inequity is manufactured than that lesson that day. Some students shared their pizza, most didn't. Those of us who just ate the gruel, which was most of the school, rejoiced it was not that bad and sang songs to get us through that meal. And to present our righteous anger to those pizza eaters who were just gobbling up pizza and they got soda. And in those middle, that was the most complacent group. They had enough, not enough to share, just enough to stare longingly at the pizza boxes and wonder and wish. So from that day, I began to move through the world believing there is enough to go around, be it food, be it art, be it opportunity, or be it love. I had no idea, though, how limited opportunity was for playwrights, for female playwrights, for Black playwrights, for poor playwrights. After my mother's divorce and my father's degrees were basically rendered irrelevant, and I spent most of my life being a rather poor playwright. The table metaphor is lovely if those controlling grad school, theater companies, awards organizations are all at the table and are mostly white and men and moneyed. Well, you can believe all you want, but the table may not make room for you. It does not need to. So what do you do then? For me, I got lucky. Because theater is a lot about luck. You need talent and you need to work hard, but you also need to get your foot in the door, and because art is rather subjective and insular, luck has more to do with it than a lot of other things. So I got into grad school. My writing teacher in college pointed me to her alma mater, and eventually they let me in. Took me a little bit, but I made it in there. And I met people. So why get an MFA if you are a playwright? Because it introduces you to people, artists, in my case, artistic directors and producers and future mentors who appreciate that MFA, or at least see its value as a training ground and hire you and introduce you to more people. And work begets work begets work, and you build a career. But higher education sometimes is a little bit tricky. It is a font of resources, peers and libraries, databases, teachers and faculty, space to gather, which is the real expensive in terms of theater and theater creation. And for some, health insurance, which is another reason why I need to go, is because this was pre-Obama. I did not have health insurance. At 23 years old, and only 2 years out of college, I was bounced off my mom's insurance, and that was a big part of me going, which also just relates to this idea of what is enough and how do we provide for all. So sometimes MFA programs can breed the notion that there is not enough room. And this is where it really became one of the places where this became tested for me, because oftentimes you've never heard any people cramble and crumble and fight and scramble about resources than you have if you're in an artist and a graduate program. Myself, being on scholarships and students' loans while attending college, and then at scholarships and teaching assistantships in grad school, I got the impression that there's actually always enough room, and somehow to add, if there's not enough room, you add a chair. And like I said, schools can often make it seem like there is not enough, and grad school can amplify this idea. And that, for me, created this idea of hopelessness, and I realized in grad school that I had to choose not to invest in that ideology. There is always an extra chair. If no more chairs can fit, build a bench. If the bench gets crowded, add another table leaf. If you find yourself without any more wood, you move that meal to the floor. So the advice is for holding those modes of production, inclusive must be a practice. It is not a trick from those of us who went to these more progressive schools. Inclusion is a cultural value. Centers of a Black community, our churches, our community schools, our neighborhoods often practice inclusion. So sometimes we do not, and that should not be, but many of them do. So how those of us of the Black diaspora survive traumas like the Middle Passage, like enslavement and relocation and the end of Reconstruction and the advent of lynchings, the Great Migration, Jim Crow, how we survive those was by practicing subversive and radical inclusivity. So being a Black artist, the idea there's not enough spaces to tell our stories, not enough funding to ensure artists can do their work and feed themselves and their families and afford to care for themselves when they get sick, and perhaps own their own modes of communication. This idea of not enough does not make sense to me. On a spiritual level, it does not make sense and never does. On a socio-historical level, it doesn't make sense and never does to me. And on a cultural level, it absolutely fundamentally does not make sense, and I don't think ever will. So this is what I bring and practice and teach as an artist. There is always room. In my teaching, it shows up as there is always being room for one more student who wants to learn. And once that student is in my class, there's always room to fail. So artists must learn to fail and fall and learn to get back up and keep doing their work. And there is always room in my classrooms to pause. So artists should not, my belief, subscribe to the idea that we are always in a hurry to make more. So my classrooms provide a space for quiet, also learned, and silence and reflection, also learned in Quaker school. And in my classrooms, there's always room for more stories, more perspective, and these can coexist. So stories are truths, and truths do not always agree, but they can and do coexist. In my writing, it shows up as working to show stories the modern Western read American theater does not routinely present. So stories about race and class and gender, where the characters in those stories are allowed to be complex and complicated, and sometimes bad, and sometimes human, and sometimes questioned. So I thought I'd share with you some of that writing. I'm not an actor, which is actually a good thing that I discovered that. Just cut out many years of trying to do that. That's not me. I'm definitely a playwright reading their own work. So the first piece, as Jovanna mentioned, I'm gonna read from is Milk Like Sugar. So I write this piece precisely to uplift the stories of people whose stories are not, or were not at the time, told on the stage. So I will note that Milk Like Sugar premiered after shows like Ruined, so I fit in this class of writers after Lynn Nottage, after Kia Corcoran, but before plays like Schoolgirls, the African Mean Girls play by Jocelyn Bio, or even Dance Nation, who was by Claire Barron, who was not a Black writer, but that's where I fit. So we have more of these stories now, and I'm really happy that we do. But as I was coming up, we did not, and that's why I chose to write about what I did for Milk Like Sugar. So when discussing any playwrights from marginalized groups, it's important to know the plays and the writers writing these stories do and always have existed. So the trick, the artistic and cultural crime to me, is that they have not been supported and often as often or produced as much. So it's really important, especially as a writer, to understand, or an artist, to understand that often if you feel like you are the pioneer, there's so many other voices that came before you who were not given this space. Milk Like Sugar began as a commission. So a place called Theater Masters sent me to go, and La Jolla Playhouse sent me to a conference called the Aspen Ideas Festival. I'd never been there. They didn't give us much context, except that it was like summer camp for really intellectually engaged and some very wealthy people. At bathroom break, an example, at bathroom breaks, I kept getting in the same bathroom lines as Ariana Huffington and Elma Powell. So this was the space, and at one time Hillary Clinton, and I was a nursing mother at the time, so I'm literally pumping and nursing in a stall, and there are these luminaries in the bathroom with me. That was humbling, and that's when I began to understand where I was. So the Aspen Ideas Festival invites many speakers to come talk about ills and troubles and challenges that our world is facing, and how we might present those challenges, and then also how we might tackle them, bringing minds together. One of the themes that rippled through the conference that summer was the idea that if you want to help a community, invest in that community's young women. So I began to think about that. Several speakers kept talking about that over my week there. And at the same time, Massachusetts had this since retracted news story about a pregnancy pact in Gloucester. And whether or not these girls all entered into wanting to be pregnant together at the same time to be able to get resources, maybe to get married, these young men, it became evident that one of these young women who were in high school, were economically disadvantaged. There was very little opportunity for them in Gloucester, Mass. So while these were not Black young women, I began thinking about that, about this idea that when you feel like you have no other choices, you make this other choice that perhaps is not the healthiest or most thought through. And I also want to lift up the voices that I was encountering when I was a adjunct public speaking teacher, which is always funny to me, because like most people, public speaking is, I'm up here, but is a rather terrifying thought. But for many years I taught public speaking, and my students who were economically disadvantaged Black and brown women for the most part would often talk about the idea, the concept of getting out, and the guilt they felt, the survivor's guilt of stepping out of a community where they saw their friends' lives either cut short or severely impacted by their circumstances. So I want to put all this into a play, like Milk Like Sugar. I also wanted to create a situation, so I was really aware of who my audience was going to, my first audience at least, was going to be for that play, and it's going to be at La Jolla Playhouse, which is a theater in a very well-funded, affluent community, mostly white audience. And I wanted that audience to leave that play and say, I see this social issue, disadvantage, what should I do about it? So there's a telescope in the play. At the end, it used to be much more, I don't know if now as a slightly older playwright, I'm like, do you want to put an audience in a defensive position? Maybe, maybe not. The original first ending stage direction of that play was that this telescope that's being used throughout the play as a metaphor for being able to look up and see your opportunity or possibility in the universe above, trains on the audience and stays there. That was a little directive, and I think we took that out. Some versions might still have that, but that's where I was going, and that for that original audience. So in the story, there's 3 girls. They enter the pregnancy pact, and it worked out differently for each young woman. But there's also a 4th girl who really wants into this pact. And so when I think of Kira, the main playwright is named Annie. When I think of Kira, that 4th girl, who's neglected by her family, she has a very strong spiritual center, but she's been neglected by her congregation because she isn't necessarily able to support that congregation with money. I really wanted to get at the heart of exclusion and erasure of voice. So this is a point in the play that Kira has told Annie, the main character who enters in the pregnancy pact, who's trying to decide, like, should she join it, should she not? And Kira has said there's another way to be in this world, slightly with a more intact spiritual core. And Annie goes to visit her because she doesn't feel that anymore. It's the middle of the night. Annie, I'm sorry to wake you up. I didn't know who else would listen, but you didn't have to meet me on the corner. I could have found your house okay. Kira, it's confusing, tiny streets and out of the way. Annie, and why are you out of breath? Kira, glad you've been keeping up with my text about those satin slippers, the pure hearts. Next, we gotta get you knowing your Bible. On Sunday, you come to church with me. There's that music and cookies and juice right after. Pastors say, the more youth I bring in to come to the church as a thank you, he had me over his house for Sunday dinner. Annie, I'm thinking you help me now, like you did with that radio in the kitchen. Kira, his wife did the table up real nice over there, tablecloth, and nothing plastic on the table the whole meal. Annie, maybe you help me now, though, not Sunday, now. Kira, if you come with me to church, pastor can help you invite you both to dinner. You, me, the pastor, his wife, Annie. So you text me to get a free meal? Kira, it ain't for the free, it's at the pastor's. Annie, what about all the food and games you've been saying you got at your own house? Kira, I deserve a good meal. Annie, and how come you meet me on the corner? How out the way could you live for real? Kira, my folks is particular. Annie, and I thought you too good for sneakers like the rest of us. Kira, it's so late, I just threw everything on. Annie, and why are we meeting on a corner, Kira, in the dark, in the middle of the night, in your nightgown? If your daddy dresses you in ball gowns and you all play Yahtzee, Kira, you want to know about me. Annie, what I want to know is the truth, right, Kira? The truth? The truth is, every second of every day, I pray to be someone else, anyone else but me, for even just a moment. Even though I am good, I am good, I am good, I am so good. I visit my father every week. I don't got no one to take me, so I take the Greyhound. I go every week. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land, which thy Lord thy God giveth thee. I go every week, even though he got on that orange jumpsuit. And I go talk to him behind the glass through a phone. I know he found his way. He's the one in his letter start telling me about the word, start telling me to read my Bible, that when I started going to church after my daddy went away, my mom ain't never found her way. She plays the coin slots down Foxwoods, takes her whole paycheck down Foxwoods. She don't remember my gym clothes. She barely remember what grade I'm in. But pastors say his home is always open, long as my heart stay pure and I work for the Lord. And that's what my text be doing. I doing the work of the Lord. I deserve tablecloths and real forks and real spoons. I deserve them. I deserve them. I should be wearing satin. I should be shielded. I should be playing Yahtzee. This is vanity, Kira. This is sin, Kira. This is sin, Kira. This is sin. This is sin. This is sin. Kira bows her head. And then the scene ends. So I use Kira as a vehicle for me to explore the proverbial table. Who gets to sit at it and show the consequences of exclusion. The next play that I use, thinking about this idea of who has, how much can we fit to be able to provide for all. It shows up in every play, but I'm going to read from Our Daughters Like Pillars. So Our Daughters Like Pillars also started as a commission. Playwrights, when you are able, when the opportunity is there, a lot of us write on commission. So theater pays us, and we write usually on a subject that theater has asked us to write about. So, or you can choose your own, and they approve it. And this was a commission. At first, I wanted to adapt Dorothy West's The Living is Easy. The West Estate was not so into that, and that's fine. So I found a way to get what I wanted from that book and put it in the play. So the play is about a family, 3 sisters and a brother. It wasn't originally post-pandemic, but it took so long to get this play up, it became about the pandemic. And they all go on vacation together, and the oldest daughter, they're adults, the oldest daughter wants everyone to come live together. And you realize throughout that it's because when their parents got divorced, she became the primary caretaker. And their mother, for all intents and purposes, is emotionally absent and has been for many years. And while she was able to help her sisters go through school, and her brother ends up getting money from the father, that's a whole other part of the play. It's 3 acts. I was also trying to figure out how do you build something that's big and long, expansive. So this is a monologue by Lavinia, the oldest daughter, and she's talking to her husband, who is saying, like, I don't know about this pact, I don't know this plan, I don't think it's gonna wanna live all together. And she's saying, no, it should. What we also learn is that their father, who they were estranged from, passed away that spring. So Lavinia's feeling all this pressure that many women who are in the sandwich, you got living parents and you have children, and it is a pressure cooker of care. Okay, so, oh, the other thing that inspired this was I was at a meeting, an organization meeting, and one of our missives was to just talk more freely about our own biases and our own identities. And one of the people that around the table said that he didn't believe in the idea of a starving artist. So it was like an inverse of the idea there's always opportunity. It was like there's always opportunity and anybody can get it no matter what. And my inner core went aflame because this was happened to be white identified gentleman, and I knew that his parents, he came from a upper middle class home, a home with 2 parents, 2 incomes. His college education had been paid for in some way. His parents had allowed he and his wife to buy a house in their 20s in Boston. And then by now they had 2 more homes. Their child was able to have the resources and the confidence and self-possession to test into Boston Latin. So I had some feelings about a lot of things. And as an artist, I put it in the play. All right, here it is. But you have to disguise it, because then they come after you. Okay. Lavinia, no, I say, I get everyone to agree now before Birdie shows up and talks everyone out of everything. Morris, this is starting to eat my insides. I'm gonna need Tums. Lavinia, then go finish with the trash if you're not gonna help. I don't want the ice cream to melt. Morris, I know you've had a time of it, honey. And there's a sharp shift, everything shifts, and all of a sudden Lavinia's no longer in the scene with Morris. She's just talking to us, the audience. A time of it, well, I will tell you what a time of it was. Writing myself, pulling myself back up over and over. Always do for others what they never do unto me. That is the fine print in life, That is, and it is very, very tiny. It is etched in small, small letters in that very soft space under my upper arm. The fine print is you leave your clarinet in the crawl space of the house your father kept after your mother moved the rest of you out. Then, after that, you start breathing a little bit. The fine print is my letters, my spelling, my marks were high. They were so high, the highest of all of us. But that first Thanksgiving home, after I finally learned to breathe again on my own at college, that fine print whispered, "Come home." And after I came home and saw the kitchen and the bathroom and Zelda's hair in knots, that fine print screamed, "Stay." But I didn't. Christmas, the same. Easter, worse. By next Thanksgiving, I was turning the whole work study checks over to all of them. Fine, print, no error, but I got through. I pushed. Before I had to leave, a professor told us, turned from blackening up the blackboard and told us that he didn't believe in the struggling student, the starving artist, that type of person on the crust. That is a choice, he said. That is a myth. There is always money somewhere, he said. Go find it, he said. Take it. The problem was, I could not find it. Or I would earn it and someone would need it. Fine. In the soft spot of my arm. I was sitting right there in front of that professor every week. Who was he to say someone like me did not? Who was he to say someone like me did not? I do. A branch breaks, rustle, shift, back to Morris. Time of it, no different than any other time. I am fine. So those are two examples of this idea of equity, inclusion, and redemption that I hear in Langston Hughes' poem and how it resonates with me as a Black artist. And so thank you for giving me this much time to speak my own words. Thanks very much. All right.
There we go. All right, amen. I want to see a reading. I want this table to be filled with people. We take people from the audience to read one of your scripts. That's just what I want right now. Oh, wow. But I do. Like, let's just get into it. This is the teacher part of me. Oh, my goodness. Okay, what question do I start with? Well, then let me actually start with the new material question. Where can we see your next show and when is it coming? Yes.
Yeah, here we go. My next play is going to be with Company One Theater. So Company One Theater is a theater company in Boston that makes art at forges community at the intersection of art and social change. I believe that is our mission. I am on staff there. I'm playwright in residence, and they'll be doing a play called Morning, Noon, and Night. And Morning, Noon, Night is my second Mellon Fellow play. So Mellon Foundation and HowlAround, which is an online resource for theater artists, sponsor a program where they place playwrights on staff across the country. And the program was begun to be able to, one, give playwrights a full-time paycheck. So many playwrights, especially, it's changing now, aren't paid as fully for their work as maybe they could be, and also opportunity is scarce. So you're paid fully, but you only get one opportunity a year. It's not gonna support you. So this program was created after a book called Outrageous Fortune was published in the early 2000s that highlighted this disparities in theater, and housing artists within a theater company and giving them a salary, health insurance. The biggest thing for many of the playwrights is the pay stub. So you get paid a weekly pay stub, bi-weekly pay stub. It just opens up all these opportunities for you, buying houses, cars, whatever, which sound material, but when you don't make enough, everyone needs a place to live, and everyone needs to feed themselves. So this grew out of that, and I was their second cohort of playwrights, and I was their a Mellon Fellow for 6 years. They have to produce one of the playwrights' plays in those first 3 years, and if you re-up, they have to produce again. So this play was supposed to be produced in 2020, and we had a little thing called the pandemic, which has really made theater production difficult, and that's why it's now, which is, some of these plays, when you get the commission or you get the production, they aren't ready, so we're making it ready. I'm actually in workshop rehearsal this week for that play. It goes up in April at the BCA. And then I teach at Boston University, and the students are doing a play of mine as a workshop production, which is for all intents and purposes, a BIPOC adaptation of Anna Karenina.
Okay, exciting. So we get some things soon. I I want to pull in Elma Lewis right now and thinking about the Elma Lewis School of Fine Arts, because you talked so much about, what was the quote you said? If you find yourself without wood, you move that meal to the floor. And we were talking on the phone yesterday about how there was a landscape that Elma Lewis created around the arts in Boston that made it so it's not just that the professional artist gets to be on stage and make art and dance and write, but also we're teaching youth, we're teaching people in the community. Black nativity still happens in Boston because of that foundation. And so today, how do you move theater to the floor? Both for the actors, the playwrights, but also for the audiences to have access. How do you move theater to the floor?
One of the ways, so I will just recognize my privilege of being housed in a theater company, which is Company One. But one of the things that we do when you get that grant, they were like, what are you gonna do on staff besides write? That's a given. And I got a little worried about my time. So we modeled a program called Open Write after, I've mentioned Susan Larry Parks, after a Susan Larry Parks program called Watch Me Write at the Public Theater. So I was at a meeting, there's a lunch called The Barbecue. So Redden Jacob Jenkins, who's an American playwright and screenwriter, created this thing called The Barbecue, where he just had all these Black playwrights come together. Simple, the concept is just share a meal together, but to bring them all together, we all came, it was amazing. And Susan Larry Parks, when I told her about just mentioned very briefly, she's like, watch your time. So Open Write became a way for me to be able to get my own work done and bring together new and emerging artists with mentor not older, but more experienced artists. So what Open Write is, before times we would just meet in a coffee shop, and I would be able to do my work, and other people would do their work, and we'd be together and write in community. And then we developed that during the pandemic. We moved to Zoom. So already with Zoom, if someone has a device and an internet hookup, it's already rather inclusive because the program is free, just as long as people know about it. Every third Saturday at 11, I hold space for writers. I invite an experienced writer, and I say, hey, are you working on any exercises? This year we actually do have an overarching theme of criticism and craft. So they give an exercise. So one thing we can do as artists is bring up the next generations or people who are just starting out. And part of that is sharing what we do and how we do it, how we put words together. So an already emerged artist shares an exercise of some sort, and we write together, and then they're welcome to stay, but they usually leave. And then the next hour is just us writing community. And what I find is it levels the playing field. So I talked a lot about an MFA, and that can seem very elitist. If you can find a way that the MFA is going to pay for you, that kind of levels the playing field. But often those spaces where you're going to learn, especially in playwriting, because you can have a great idea for a play, and mechanically those words have to do something in real time. It's very muscular writing, and sometimes it doesn't make sense. How do you learn to do that? You learn it by practicing. And so that's a space to be able to practice that without having to pay for it. We do ask for donations, but you do not have to pay to be in that space and learn. And then it becomes like a hive mind. People branch off and they create their own groups. People ask, hey, I've got a play or a reading. What do I do? How do I do this? And when it's working the best, it becomes all these minds coming together with varying levels of experience.
I love that, and I thank you for that. That's so generous to essentially recreate the collective learning space, to not have the financial barrier, the application barrier, any of that, but to say, no, the MFA, the degrees, they don't have a monopoly over learning. And so how do we go back to the kind of liberatory practice of that? So I love that you're doing it, and I thank you for that. I have one more question, and then we'll open it up. I have a question about craft. So as someone who is doing kind of work having to do with realism and having to do with lives, even though it's fictional work, I know realism always gets a bad rap for being too sociological. And I saw that even for Milk Like Sugar, there was a reviewer that's like, oh, it's a little sometimes overwrought, or the heavy hand of the writer. Lorraine Hansberry got that same critique for A Raisin in the Sun. Mm-hmm. And so how does someone who is invested in writing fictional works from the real life world, how do you balance between your hand as the writer, your directives within the script and the text, and then leaving room for the interpretation of the actors and the stage director? How do you balance that?
I will preface by saying, so I'm very much a playwright's playwright, in that my job is to figure out what truth I want to put on stage, act as a conduit. Many of us, whatever kind of work we do, you know when that's working. It's like the zone, and you lean on your training to get that work out, but it is also something alchemical. And playwrights, we do lean on all those people in the room to like help a script get there. But I focused very much as I began my talking about truth, like what is the truth of Kira? What does Kira need to express her truth? And if it comes out as realism, that's great. If it came out, at one point in the play, it comes out as a dance. There's no words. They turn on the radio and they start dancing. I always wish that when I see it done, the director is always like, "Don't want too much of that." I was like, "No, let's have 5 minutes of just dance." So I don't always think about what the moments after the play are going to be in terms of somebody interpreting it, but as a playwright, we do that work in the room when people, producers will come in, they'll tell you their opinion, stuff like that. And sometimes, since Milk Like Sugar was built specifically to try to elicit a specific experience or reaction for an audience, that probably also lean into some things like, I'm going to talk about this here. I might disguise it in language or music, but it's going to go into the realism sociological, because I'm trying to get a specific thing to happen for a majority of the audience.
I love that. All right. Opening it up for questions. If you have a question for Kirsten, please raise your hand and Stan or Barbara will come to you with the microphone. And if any of our virtual attendees have questions, please put it in the chat and Gina will bring it to us.
So first off, I'd kind of like to say, thank you for taking your time being here. I know it's rainy, it's a early morning, a lot of people get tired, a lot of people wouldn't want to do this kind of stuff, so I appreciate you for being here.
Well, thank you.
And my question for you is, you spoke a lot about being inclusive, it being expansive, but how do you produce your work? How do you feel about producing your work knowing that there won't be a lot of people sometimes who might agree with you or feel that your work is putting the world in like the right light, like to put in like simpler terms, like if it came to something like race and you're talking about a very heavy topic, how do you know you can have this produced without the worry or fear of people rejecting you just because your ideals might be different from theirs? Thank you.
Oh, first of all, it's a thank you very much for your question. It's a stormy morning. It's getting colder. If I can say yes to an opportunity like this, I always say yes. So I'm really happy to be here. Ooh, well, part of the work of an artist is to figure out what's your voice, how do you want to say what you want to say, and what to do when people do not agree for any reason. Sometimes they agree on the topic, like, yes, let's talk about it. I don't want you to talk about it like that. Let's not talk about it at all. Do another play. When Milk Like Sugar was premiered, we started to get hate letters about the play. And the theater was like, do you want to hear them? I do not want to hear them most of the time. I don't know why. Maybe because I had 2 very young kids. Maybe it was like hormonal breastfeeding. I was like, sure, I'll hear them. And so they read one, and the person was criticizing my play and Lynn Nodge's play, Ruined, which the theater had just done. And it was valid criticism. They're like, why, if we're going to do Black plays, why are we always showing Black people in negative light? We should be doing this person had a very specific way that they wanted to render Black life on stage, to which I say, write the play. I'll come see it. That's your play. That's not my play. But here's what the narcissistic artist in me took from that. They mentioned my name in the same paragraph as Lynn. That's great! Lynn is someone who's come before. She's in the class above of playwrights. I was like, great. Don't like my play. I'm just happy to be here with Lynn. That, though, learning how to interpret it or sometimes tune out naysayers is part of building a healthy artistic practice. You have to be able to be porous enough to accept criticism. I've never, ever seen a play produced that isn't a third or fourth or 25th draft. That means that playwright is showing the work, hearing someone else, and then rewriting. So you have to be porous and open enough for that, but also steely enough and forthright enough, confident enough to know this is what I want to do. It might not work. So there are a lot of times we're talking about failing, getting out, failing. It might not work, but you have to have enough self-possession to say, this is what I want to talk about, this is how this play is going to talk about it, and you can write your play, and I'm going to write my play. So that's how I deal with it a little bit. I also usually don't read reviews. I used to read only the good ones. My husband, he was not my husband then. This is maybe why it was good to marry him. He was like, you can't read just the good reviews because then you are inflating yourself. So don't read any of them. And he's like, I'll read the really good stuff to you if you need to know there's buzz. And your agent or someone's probably going to read the bad stuff to you. My agent does not do that because we've been together now for 20 years. He knows not to do that. But yeah, that's how I deal with criticism.
Good morning, and thank you as well for joining us this morning. I would love to know, in an ideal world, what do you envision your future being as a playwright, as a Black woman, as a mother? What would it be like? It'd be just great to hear.
Oh my goodness, we're going deep. Like, I don't know. Going back to the idea that like I'm a playwright, so I love writing for the stage. In the future, I might like to write for TV and film. Incidentally enough, this past summer was going to be like, I'm going to dig into the TV and film. I'm going to dig into it. I'm going to go to LA. I'm going to take meetings. And then there were strikes. And I was like, that is the universe telling me not to do that right now. So I think my future holds some sort of TV, film, probably feature-like movie type thing. I've always wanted to turn Luck of the Irish into a film. I work a lot on commission. One, because I'm fortunate that theaters are saying, would you like to write for us? And also, to be complete, I've been rather transparent about modes of production and money, is that's how playwrights make money. So I've had, for the past 2 years, Milk Like Sugar bounced me into a playwriting space where theaters were coming to me to write things for them. And that's been the last like 10 or 11 years. And I've finally been able to clear some of those. I was so late on so many commissions. Bad, very bad. If you're a writer out there, make your deadlines. So I see that, because I think things will open up. Post-pandemic, I assumed some more leadership positions teaching in my department, and I like it a lot more than I thought. Just thinking, and we had to revamp our curriculum. So I don't know what that means, but I've really enjoyed thinking about how to steer the education of young artists for the future. So it's a conservatory program. These are students who are coming into the program thinking they will be artists. Not all of them are, for various reasons, and not because they're not. Some of the best artists are like, they decide to go to law school, and they take that artist training with them, which is valuable. So I see continuing in that vein. I think I will somehow be a teacher. As a mom, my kids are getting older, and I'm enjoying them at every age. But I am thinking like, okay, well, when I'm not doing carpool, because we live in Central Mass, we wake up, the whole house is up by 5:30, and when I'm not doing that, how much time will be afforded back so I can expand some of the work that maybe didn't get as enough attention in the past few years that maybe it should have. I also, oh,
You got a follow-up question?
Yeah.
I got a question too. Who's your biggest muse?
Muse?
Yeah.
Oh, as in like something I go to like.
Where do you get your artistry? What drives you?
Many things. I'm very, very nosy. Very nosy. So I love going out to dinner, but it's because I like the food, kind of. But I like to eavesdrop on people. So, so it's really other. I do like people. I remember sitting on a panel once with a playwright, and someone asked a question about like, similar question, and I said, I love humanity, I love people, and the other player goes, I don't. so that was just a few years ago. I was like, oh, okay. So part of the approach is just getting myself out there with other people and listening to stories. I find I find some inspiration from reading other people's work, but I have to be very careful because you can easily usurp that other person's voice. I can get me like it's a sponge. And so if I'm writing a certain type of work, I have to make sure I'm not steering it in the wrong direction by reading. So I'm very careful. I have reading periods, writing periods, and I'm always reading something, but that influences what's feeding my work and inspiring me. For those who don't know, I have two sisters who are also writers. Kirsten Greenidge, who is a historian, who wrote about the Grimke family, and then my sister Caitlin, who is a novelist, an essayist, and an editor at Harper's Bazaar. We have an amazing group chat that is very inspirational. It's great. I mean, like any family chat, it's got videos in there. It's got things from when we were like, little kids. It's got aspirational things about what we want to do. So I'm super fortunate. Some of the burnout that I know can exist when you are an artist, when you're an artist of color, a female artist in higher ed. I have a consortium that I can consult any minute of any day. 2 o'clock in the morning, and someone's sometimes up. So that is a gift that I do not squander, and I find a lot of my inspiration from my family in that way.
Can I ask my follow-up question?
Oh, I think we might only have, how much time do we have? Trevor, one more, two more? Korea, what do you think? 2 more. Okay, so follow up, and then we had a question in the front, and we'll end there.
So you spoke about commissions, and I was just curious whether when people offer you a commission, do they have expectations as a Black female playwright that you are going to write uniquely about Black female characters or Black characters? What is not always the verbal invitation, but what's behind it, and how do you address it?
I think it depends. I love this question. It depends on the organization. It depends on my relationship with the organization. Do I have the relationship where I can say, what do you want? As a more experienced writer, I now know to ask that question and know when to dig when I need to get that answer. I remember when I was young, one of my first commissions, I did not ask that. So in my head, I'm like this progressive, talking about modes of production. That's me in my head. And this theater company asked me to write a play, and I wrote, like, the world ends at the end of this play. It's just, the play ends with trees coming, like a new North America, because this one did not work out. And they liked my writing. That was not for them, particularly because of donors. So they have a bunch of donors that the North America worked out really well for them. And they don't want to hear about us being overgrown by, New England oak. I forget what was in the play, but it was like a specific New England tree that just grew everywhere, and that was the end. I learned my lesson because they didn't produce it. They did commission me 3 more times. They never produced me because I never quite got it right. I can't take that out. I'm like, we need to redo the world. But now that I am a little more established in that, people do know that's what you're going to get. And also, I'm rather explicit, especially when, thank you, conference, for asking. I'm very explicit about what my mission is. I write for Black and brown female people. Most of my and I usually write plays that have large casts. I usually write plays that are multi-generational, so there's almost always a child in there. Like, I don't know if anyone here would invite me to their wedding, but I'm gonna bring my kids. It's multi-generational. We are all learning together. I wouldn't if they really told me not to. But there's always probably gonna be a child in there, and there's probably gonna be at least three generations of people on that stage, and that's what you get. Unless they tell me not to, unless they say like, we would really like to see this. We want to commission you, but we can only afford 3 characters. I'm like, okay, got it.
I have a couple of comments to make, and then I do have this one question. One being, I just want to say thank you for starting the Open Right program that you have. It reminds me of the Harlem Renaissance periods where everybody would get together and share their work and so forth and get comments. So I just want to say thank you. Many years ago, I went to Emerson. Many years ago, I went to Emerson College specifically for theater. I lasted the first semester. Then it was time for me to go. It was an issue that I think that, which is why I'm glad to see Open Right, is that we as people of color do not network. And when we need something, we have difficulty asking each other what to do. And I'm wondering, how does a new writer get over that? The other part is, I also work with young students who are engaging in writing. And what can we do for them, to develop their craft? I mean, you can always say, well, go check with your English teacher or your reading teacher, but it's something they just kind of want to sit down and do. And there's limited feedback. I feel like I can't give them much feedback, but it's like, how do they go about in reaching that? And I'm talking about 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders that I work with.
Ooh, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Oh, what a wonderful age.
So first of all, I want to say thank you. I've seen your plays at the Caldecott and at the Huntington Theater, and I am so grateful for what you do produce and present, and I always leave thinking. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for coming to Open Right. Have you come to Open Right? Yeah. Oh, please do. We have one in November. There are in terms of networking or asking, I believe that too is a practice. I don't like asking for anything. I didn't even ask my family to do the laundry that is like 5 feet tall in my bathroom right now. So it is a practice, and I find, for me personally, it always feels wrong or too much, whether it's the laundry or whether it's, hey, can I write 9 characters instead of 3? Because that's what the play is. So I would tell young writers to engage, try to find spaces where that practice is appreciated. It isn't appreciated in every classroom. So I had many teachers who did not appreciate questions from certain people, or openness in that way. 3rd and 4th, so specifically, if I'm going to go real inside baseball, 3rd and 4th graders interested in theater writing, Tufts and Wheelock might be good spaces. So Wheelock, I don't know, this is all my pre-pandemic knowledge, but Tufts has a really, really wonderful children's theater program they run this summer. I believe it now includes technical theater too. So how to, design things, push buttons. I say push buttons, see, that's what I would be doing. But these people can actually program stuff. And then performing into. And Wheelock, I think, has similar, I don't know if they have a summer camp, but I think they do have a year-long program. I came up through, so this is full disclosure, this is like slightly nepotism, I guess nepotism. I came up through the Wheelock program, so I did classes there, and I did 2 shows, my first 2 professional shows in high school. The reason why I was doing theater at Wheelock is because the theater classes in my public high school were not so conducive to seeing someone they didn't recognize in their cast. So I never got cast in any musicals or plays in high school. Mm-hmm.
I'm coming.
My students, middle to lower class, economic status, they don't always have the financial background or support to go on and do the summer classes. We have taken them to the Wheelock Family Theater, so they've gotten exposed to that. So what do we do next? I mean, what are we, other than encouraging them to continue to write kind of thing, but I don't know what else we can do for them.
I'm wondering if there's if you could get connected to like a teaching artist program. So if it seems like what I'm noticing is you're noticing students who want to engage in this way over a course of several years. So there's this need. So are there teaching artists, and several of our theater companies in town have them, that will be able to come to your school, funded, so the school is not paying directly for it, but funded. And maybe that is a way to meet that need.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. This has been beautiful to talk about equity, to talk about access, to talk about inspiration, craft. I'm very excited for the next time we get to hear from you. I expect to see all of you all at the opening night for the new production for morning, noon, and night in April 2024. Yes? All right. We'll be there. We'll see you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.